These are the diseases you need to know in AP Environmental Science. You need to fill out your chart while watching this video. And go ahead and pause as needed. The first one you need to know is malaria. So malaria, the disease is a protozoa. So protozoa is a single-celled organism that is a eukaryotic organism. So bacteria are prokaryotic simple organisms where protozoa are eukaryotes and they're complex cells. And so protozoa is a single complex cell. And so it's carried by mosquitoes. Now, mosquitoes do a lot of damage in terms of diseases. A mosquito itself can't kill you, but if it happens to be carrying a protozoa or a virus or bacteria of some kind inside its body, it can transmit that to you from another infected person. So the mosquito has to go and bite somebody who's infected and bring that protozoa over to you. Malaria is eradicated in the United States a long time ago when we drained our wetlands, actually. But it still kills millions each year, especially in places like Africa or other tropical locations. So if you go to Africa and you happen to get malaria and you come back home, you can get treated here because we have the medicines. But there's so many people in Africa and the countries are so poor that people can't get the medicine they need for it. One thing that a lot of humanitarian places are doing is they're providing mosquito nets. So when you sleep, you're protected from the mosquitoes. So DDT is a harmful pesticide, but it's really good at killing mosquitoes. And so it's kind of this good in some ways, but really terrible in other ways that you'll learn about in this chapter. The next one here is West Nile virus. And West Nile virus is also carried by mosquitoes. Now, mosquitoes, the reason why they suck your blood is actually they need it to breed, to make babies. Otherwise, they can eat other things in the environment. West Nile virus happens to be a virus, and the vector, again, is a mosquito. You get fever, chills. It does kill people, and it's considered a newer disease in the US, even though it's actually an old disease. It just didn't come around for a long time. So it's the resurgence of an old disease. So in the US, we do have this West Nile virus, and it does kill some people, not a lot, but it does kill some people in the United States. Most of the time, if you happen to get it, and we do have it in Santa Clarita in the summers, the first thing you notice is dead birds. So if you happen to see a dead bird that's not been killed, like if you see trauma, it's probably been killed by a cat or some other predator. But if it just looks dead and you don't know why, don't touch it, but call animal control and they'll come and collect it. And they'll test it for West Nile. And so every year we do have birds positive for West Nile in Santa Clarita. We haven't had anybody die here from the disease, and people aren't really getting it from here. Most of the time, people in Santa Clarita traveled to a different state and picked it up there. So some years it's particularly bad. Some years it's not bad at all. It's not something we need to worry about too much in Santa Clarita because we don't have a lot of mosquitoes here. It's very dry. The next disease is cholera. This is a bacteria that is transferred via water. And it is still a huge problem worldwide because 1 billion people on the planet do not have access to safe drinking water. And this is a huge problem. So basically, if people poop too close to a drinking water source and the water is not treated, That's how one of the main reasons and ways that people get cholera. So in places where the water is not particularly safe, you can boil your water, you can treat it through a filter, um, and that doesn't just kill cholera, it also kills other waterborne diseases as well. In the US, we used to have it. One of the main leading deaths of people like on the Oregon Trail or other wagon trains in the 1800s when they were settling the Western United States was cholera. So wagon trains would come to a river and they didn't know, but the river was infected with the bacteria. The next one is Zika, and Zika is also transmitted by virus. I'm sorry, it is a virus transmitted by mosquitoes. It is real new to the United States and to the world. And the biggest problem they had was that it was in Brazil, and people were all flying down there for the 2016 Rio de Janeiro Summer Olympics. And there were some people, like news announcers or reporters, that said, I'm not going to go down there because either I'm pregnant or we're trying to get pregnant. And even a man, because it is also sexually transmitted. And so most of the time it's mosquitoes, but it can also be sexually transmitted. So a husband can give it to his wife if he gets it from a mosquito in Rio and then goes home, and he can actually give it to his wife. And then the problem is that if she becomes pregnant, these are the birth defects. So it's a small head size. On the internet, you can look up Zika babies and you can see some of the deformities. It's pretty terrible. We're trying to figure out a vaccine for it and a way to eliminate it. It has come to the United States mostly through people getting on an airplane, bringing it here. In the last couple of years, it hasn't been big, but it was earlier, a few years ago. So the plague is another one that you have to know. And the plague is a bacteria via fleas on rats. And so this disease has two vectors. And in the Middle Ages, when they had those big outbreaks of Black Death that they said killed like 25% of Europe, the rats carried the fleas, and the fleas jumped off the rats and bit people. Because back in the day, their homes, they weren't sealed like they are now. You're not going to have rats or mice in your house if you have every crevice or crack sealed. And so back in the day, they just didn't have the technology to do that. And so there were rats in people's homes, and the fleas jumped off the rats and bit the people, and the fleas had bacteria in them. So it was transmitted from person to person that way. There are other animals that can carry us. So we do have this bacteria, the bubonic plague bacteria. It does still exist, but now we have antibiotics, so we can treat it through antibiotics. Oh goodness, maybe 20 years ago, they had tested some squirrels in California and found that the squirrels were carrying bubonic plague, but it's really rare. So these are the symptoms here, and the reason the lymph glands are in your neck and they get swollen when you have a normal cold or flu anyway. But that's kind of where it got its name. The lymph glands used to be called something like the booblies or something like that. And so that's what the lymph glands used to be called. It can also be spread through bodily fluids and tissues. So the body fluids that we're talking about is through coughing and sneezing or throwing up. So people that had the plague, some forms of the plague you could get just through the air too, back in the day, back in the Middle Ages. The next one is tuberculosis. It is a bacteria that damages the lungs. Historically, it was deadly, although some people did recover from tuberculosis. My grandmother had tuberculosis as a child in the 1920s, and so her family moved from Tennessee, which is very humid and moist, to Colorado, which has a dry climate. And that actually helped cure her, her lungs. The dry climate helped. And so some people did get better from tuberculosis, but a lot of people died. Back in the day, it was also called consumption. So you get it through breathing in the bacteria from another person. You can see that up here in this picture. You have to kind of breathe in a lot of it. It isn't just a one exposure, because some people would take care of tuberculosis patients and never get it themselves either, because they were real careful not to breathe in the same air. So it did kill people up until about the 1940s, when penicillin was discovered and started being used. And then we were almost completely eliminated tuberculosis, which was great because, again, it killed a lot of people in the world before this. But now we have resistant strains. And so there are some strains of TB now that are resistant to antibiotics. So TB is so contagious that you aren't allowed to go to school until you get a TB test. So when you started kindergarten, you had to go to the doc and get this fluid that was injected under your skin, and that's actually a test for tuberculosis. As a teacher, I have to get that test every 5 years to make sure I don't have tuberculosis, so I'm not spreading it to my students. The next one you have to know is SARS, which stands for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome. And this is a virus, and it is mostly in Asia. It's a form of pneumonia, causes lung damage, and it's spread by breathing the air. So people who have it breathe it out, and people breathe it in. So when they had a severe SARS outbreak, they've had it a couple of times, mainly in Asia. Some people have gotten it here mainly through global air travel, but it's mainly in Asia, and so people will go around wearing masks because you don't know who caught it and doesn't show symptoms yet. So most of the time, whenever you catch a disease, you don't show the symptoms until that virus or bacteria has replicated itself in your body millions of times, and then the immune system kicks in, and then you start to feel terrible. But so when you first catch a disease, you can spread it real easily before you even know you have it. And so this is why people wear masks and things. The next one is MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome. It is a virus also. It's similar to the flu. They are still studying this one, so they don't have everything that they don't know quite everything yet, but they believe that it is transmitted via camels and bats. So you can see the picture up here of the camel. It is mainly in the Middle East, but we have had a few cases of it in the United States. Again, probably because of global air travel. So somebody catches there, they don't show any symptoms, and then they fly to the United States, and then they get sick from catching it in the Middle East. So again, there's still more research about it coming out. So this is a nice little graphic about camels and bats. So you have your camels, you have your bats, and how they believe some people have gotten it from these animals. And again, this little thing just tells that it's not clear how it jumped from animals to people. And then most of the time people spread it to others. Now, some people get it and they never get sick, but they can spread it. And so you can see that through air travel up here, we've had some of it arrive in the United States. The next one is dysentery. So dysentery is one that actually killed a lot of soldiers in the past. So in the Civil War, a lot of soldiers died from dysentery more than, in fact, I think in the Civil War, more soldiers died from catching an illness than actually from dying from in battle. But dysentery is intestinal problems. Most of the time it's a bacteria, but sometimes the intestinal problems can be caused by a virus or protozoa. But again, most of the time it's a bacteria. It is spread through untreated sewage and contaminated water, very similar to cholera. And so it's kind of a classification for diarrheal diseases, mostly from bacteria, occasionally from viruses. It is still in the world. We don't have it here because we have sanitary conditions and we treat our sewage, which we also call wastewater. So some other notes you need to understand. So urban ecology has led to higher disease risk. So go ahead and write this down on your chart. We use services more than we ever have in the past, which leaves us open to catching diseases. So children go to daycare, and it used to be children stayed at home with the mom mostly. And even though the mom had lots of things to do in the house, um, the children were there. And so now a lot of moms work outside the home. And so children go to daycare where they can catch things more easily. Um, Whether it's something simple like pink eye or colds or flus, um, that can happen. Cleaning services, so if you have somebody coming in your house to clean, they can, and if they're sick, you can catch from them. So food preparation used to pretty much almost all be done at home, and now people, they get a lot of takeout and they go to restaurants a lot. Um, Spa and beauty, whenever you go to, and I love going to the spa. I love getting my nails done. I love getting facials. But you need to make sure that your salon and your nail salon, they use sterile equipment. And you can even ask them about that. Say, hey, I learned about this in AP Environmental Science. I was just wondering how you sterilize your equipment. And then again, pre-made food increases dramatically. This is a new thing, really, in society, just in the past few decades, that we have food prepared out of the house that we're bringing in. And again, I talked about beauty parlors and barbershops. So each additional service that, again, women didn't used to do back 50, 60 years ago, but now we do all these things, and I enjoy them as well. But they do leave us open for additional pathogens. If you go to a gym, and I go to the gym or a health club, there's also bacteria there. Now, most gyms try to maintain cleanliness because they don't want any diseases spread in their locations. Um, so, but again, all these new things that we do in our society in the past several decades do leave us more open to diseases that are passed. And then now we have a lot of globalization, so we can fly to other parts of the world, and very, very quickly on an airplane. It used to be when people were sick and they'd take a boat from location to location, they get on the boat and then they come down with symptoms, and then they'd be quarantined. They wouldn't be allowed off the boat. It happened with immigrants from in Ellis Island. If you were sick, they wouldn't let you off the boat, or they put you in a hospital unit at Ellis Island because they didn't want the diseases making it here. But with air travel, a person could fly across the world and get off the plane, and then finally they get sick once they're at that new location. Also, the fact that we have more urban dwellers living closer together creates higher risk of transmission because you live closer together, it's more crowded, it's more easy to spread the disease. With climate change, we will have more of floods, El Ninos are more severe, and more hurricanes. We won't have more earthquakes with climate change, but any type of natural disaster, especially in cities, because people are more close together, they bring in risks of diseases. So when you have a flood come in, either from a hurricane or anything else, what happens is that it floods the sewers, and then all the sewer water gets into the flood water. And if people are wading through flood water to get to their houses or away from their houses to evacuate, they can be exposed to all those diseases and pathogens that were in the sewer. So these are ones that you don't have to write down, but they have been in Santa Clarita in the past couple of years. We get notifications every year that some kids have come down with whooping cough, also known called pertussis, and it's a highly contagious bacteria. So when a kid comes down with it, they can't go back to school until they're completely cured. And it does have a vaccine, and it's really very, very difficult for babies, especially. And they used to die from it a lot before vaccines, but it has come back more recently. Um, and then the next one here is measles. It has also come back recently, mainly from spread through people who choose not to get vaccinated. Um, and it is highly contagious. This is the one that is really kind of worldwide, especially in Europe and the United States, and a lot of other places too. In 2018, there were 140,000 deaths worldwide from measles, and it does have a vaccine. So these are just two resurgent diseases that have come back in the past few years. And because you see these things in the newspaper and you get notices from school, this is why I just wanted you to be aware of what they were.